All right, today we're jumping into one of the most defining, most devastating conflicts in all of human history, the Second World War. We're going to break down how it all started, the brutal reality of the fighting, and how it completely reshaped the world. So let's get right into it.
First things first, you have to wrap your head around this number. Over 70 million. That's the best estimate we have for the number of people who died. It's a number so huge, it's almost impossible to truly comprehend, and it really sets the stage for the sheer gravity of what we're talking about here.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did we get there? How did a conflict of this unbelievable scale ignite, and what did it leave in its wake? We're going to trace that path from a really fragile peace right into total war and see how the echoes of that war still shape the world we live in right now. Now, to really understand World War II, you can't just start in 1939 when the invasion of Poland happened. No, you've got to go back further, back to the end of the First World War, because that's where the seeds of this next, even deadlier conflict were planted. You know, it wasn't just one thing that caused the war. It was really a domino effect. It all starts with a super harsh peace treaty that basically crippled Germany, leading to economic chaos. That humiliation and turmoil? It was the perfect breeding ground for extremist leaders to grab power. And once they did, they started aggressively expanding. And the international community, the League of Nations? Well, it was too weak to do anything about it, which just encouraged them to take more. Each step just made the next one feel kind of inevitable.
And this quote really hits the nail on the head. For a lot of Germans, the Treaty of Versailles wasn't about a just peace. It felt like punishment, plain and simple. And all that anger, that deep resentment, it was the perfect tool for guys like Adolf Hitler. He promised to rip up the treaty and make Germany proud again. That desire for revenge was basically the fuel for the fire that was coming.
So with all this aggression building up, the other big powers, they try a new tactic. It's called appeasement. The thinking was, hey, maybe if we give Hitler some of what he wants, we can avoid another massive war. But here's the thing, letting Germany just take parts of Czechoslovakia didn't calm him down. It just made him want more. It showed him that nobody was going to stop him. So yeah, the policy of appeasement, it backfired. Big time. Okay, so diplomacy is pretty much dead in the water at this point. And as that hope faded, the world started splitting into two heavily armed camps. The major alliances that would fight this global war were starting to form. On one side, you had the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan. They were really driven by this shared ambition to build massive empires through sheer military force. And then, standing against them, you had the Allied powers. This was a really diverse group, led by the UK, the Soviet Union, the US, and China, but they all came together with one main goal: stop the Axis aggression. This really set the stage for a truly global fight. And of course, behind these big alliances were some larger-than-life figures whose choices would decide the fate of millions. You've got Adolf Hitler, the main architect of the whole war. On the Allied side, there's Winston Churchill, who became this incredible symbol of British defiance. Franklin D. Roosevelt, who turned America into what he called the arsenal of democracy. And Joseph Stalin, who led the Soviet Union's incredibly brutal but absolutely decisive fight on the Eastern Front. Now, it's really important to get this. World War II wasn't just World War I, Part 2. Not even close. It was fought with terrifying new technologies, radical new strategies, and a level of brutality that was just on a different planet. This was going to change what war even meant. The first huge innovation was Germany's Blitzkrieg, which literally means lightning war. Forget the slow, grinding trenches of the last war. This was all about speed and shock. You have tanks and planes hitting the enemy lines all at once, just smashing through, causing total chaos and forcing a quick collapse. It's how Germany managed to conquer Poland, France, and a huge chunk of Europe with stunning speed in those early years. The other thing is, the war became what we now call a total war. And what that means is that winning wasn't just up to the soldiers anymore. It depended on the entire country. Factories making tanks became just as important as the front lines. And tragically, that also meant that civilians and the cities they lived in became military targets. The line between the battlefield and the home front, it just got erased. And we absolutely have to stop and talk about the war's darkest chapter, the Holocaust. This was not some tragic side effect of the war. It was a central mission of the Nazi regime, driven by their ideology. We're talking about a systematic, factory-like genocide that murdered 6 million Jews and millions of other people as well. It's an atrocity that is just without precedent in all of human history. So, by 1945, the war in Europe is finally over. But the fight in the Pacific against Japan is still raging. and the world was about to enter a new, absolutely terrifying phase of warfare. On August 6th, the United States dropped the world's first atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima.
Just 3 days later, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. The sheer, unprecedented destruction from these two weapons is what finally forced Japan's surrender, at long last bringing World War II to an end. But in doing so, it slammed the door open to the nuclear age and a whole new kind of global fear.
So the fighting finally stops. But the world was completely and permanently changed. The end of this war wasn't just an end, it was the beginning of a totally new era, and we are still living with its legacy today.
And this chart, wow, it really lays bare the reality of total war. Out of those 70+ million people who died, the majority, about 60%, were civilians. Just think about that for a second. This wasn't just a war between armies, it was a war fought against ordinary people, which is what makes it the deadliest conflict in history, by any measure.
From the absolute ashes of the war, a new world order started to form. The United Nations was created, with the hope of making sure a catastrophe like this could never happen again. The old European empires were shattered, which led to two new superpowers rising, the United States and the Soviet Union. Their rivalry kicked off the Cold War, which would define the next 50 years. At the same time, all those weakened colonial empires started to fall apart, leading to independence movements all across Asia and Africa. The world map was literally redrawn.
And that kind of brings us to our final thought. The world learned some incredibly painful lessons from World War II. Lessons about extremism, about what happens when diplomacy fails, and about the horrors of unchecked aggression. It led to a whole new focus on human rights and working together. The question we're left with today is, in a world that's still full of conflict, are we still actually listening to those lessons?